Just how good is the M4 iPad Pro for musicians? Can it be recommended for sheet music? If so, which configuration is best for reading music? This video will answer all of these questions and more. This is an update to my overview of using an iPad for sheet music. In that video, we took a closer look at the newly redesigned models, including the 13-inch iPad Air and iPad Pro, and I shared my conclusion that musicians really just need a large, bright, and ideally glare-free tablet with a stylus. While the 13-inch M4 iPad Pro is a real technological marvel, the need to upgrade to at least 1 terabyte of storage, along with that model's upgrades to the processor and the memory, just to get the option to configure it with Apple's even more expensive glare-free Nano-texture display, makes it far too expensive for most everyday musicians. Well, in the meantime, I bit the bullet and ended up getting one myself, and I'd like to share with you my experiences thus far. So, is it something that I'd recommend? Let's find out. There was no way I was going to spend over 2,500 euros on a tablet, let alone another 550 euros on a keyboard and stylus. Here in Europe, the minimum price for a 13-inch iPad Pro with cellular and a matte, or nano-texture as Apple calls it, screen costs the equivalent of over 3,000 US dollars, and that's without any accessories. For most everyday musicians, that's simply too high an asking price, especially considering that the vast majority of the device's power will just go unused. So I started looking into secondhand devices and stumbled upon what looked like it could be a viable option. As far as I could tell, the site called Back Market appeared to be reputable. They offer a 30-day return window, they work exclusively with qualified refurbishing partners, and they guarantee that any device that they resell has been properly sourced. There I found exactly the configuration I was looking for, at a little over half the price at my local Apple store, and presumably it was in outstanding condition. It seemed too good to be true. Surely there must be a catch. Nonetheless, after doing some research, I decided to take a chance, so I placed the order. Just 2 days later, the package arrived. It came in a plain brown box. Apple's original packaging was missing, as were the original charger, the USB cable, and Apple's polishing cloth to clean the nano-texture screen. Instead, a generic charger and USB cable were supplied. So, how about the device itself? Turns out it was exactly the device I ordered. 13-inch iPad Pro in space black with 1 terabyte of storage, cellular connectivity, and the coveted nano-texture display. And its condition? Absolutely flawless. On my device, there wasn't the slightest scratch anywhere on it, either on the case or on the screen. Backmarket guarantees that all iPads it resells have a charging capacity of at least 85% of that of a new device. After setting up the iPad, I checked the battery in the Settings app. So its maximum charging capacity, a perfect 100%. Even better, it had a mere 2 charging cycles, so the device is truly as good as new. Now I assume someone likely ordered it and quickly decided that the matte screen just wasn't for them, but whatever happened, it turned out to be serendipitous for me. The only catch when ordering Apple gear secondhand is that it's ineligible for AppleCare Plus, so you'll have to be extra careful if you go this route. So, how is the tablet itself, and do I recommend it to fellow musicians? In short, it's absolutely perfect for musicians. In fact, it's my favorite device and the most impressive hardware I've ever owned of any sort, I think. And no, I would emphatically not recommend it to musicians. But let me be clear. The one and only reason I wouldn't unconditionally recommend this 13-inch iPad Pro with a matte nano-texture display is its extremely high price. But if you could find one used in like-new condition at a greatly reduced price, like I did, or if Apple ever makes the nano-texture option available on lower-end models, such as the base 256 gigabyte model, or maybe even the iPad Air, then I'd enthusiastically recommend it to performing musicians as the top choice for those who use Apple's ecosystem. Now, of course, if price isn't an issue for you and you want the best screen, the most impressive hardware available, then by all means, get one and enjoy it. You'll no doubt love it. In terms of hardware, Apple knocked it out of the park. Everything works instantaneously, it's extremely thin, and now light enough to use a 13-inch model for everyday tablet tasks. The screen is basically perfect, and I could go on. It will almost certainly last you years before you'll need to consider upgrading. For most musicians, though, there are far less expensive options out there that may not be quite as incredible, but they're still pretty great, let's be honest. Now, musicians are, of course, not limited to iPads. Android tablets have been getting better and better, and there are perfectly viable options among them. Some have special features that may make them especially suitable for music scores. Samsung's Galaxy Tab S10 Ultra, for instance, has a huge 14.6-inch screen in a thin chassis. The Galaxy Tab also comes with an anti-reflective coating. It's not an upgrade, rather it's a standard feature. Some reviewers like Apple's Nano-texture better, others like Samsung's anti-reflective coating a little better, but they all seem to agree that they're effective. The iPad Pro screen gets much brighter, so if you'll be using your tablet outdoors or on stage under bright lights, then that might be a deciding factor. But that said, Samsung still offers a viable yet still high-end option for performing musicians at a much cheaper, though still hardly cheap, price. Apple's Nano-texture, by contrast, isn't a coating. It's a special texture that's etched directly into the glass itself at the nanometer level using some novel technological process. It scatters light and eliminates or greatly reduces any reflections, making the screen easily readable in any lighting conditions. So what are my impressions of the much-touted Nano-texture screen as a musician? For me, personally, it's a game changer. It makes sheet music and everything else too look pretty similar to paper. Combined with the very bright dual OLED technology used in the latest iPad Pros, this makes the screen readable even in direct sunlight or on stage under bright spotlights. And it's glaringly bright. In the past, I sometimes had to ask stagehands to reposition lights so that they don't shine directly onto the screen while I'm playing, and now I just won't have to worry about it anymore. The Nano-texture glass also feels different to the touch. It's much smoother when using the touch screen. With standard glass, there can be noticeable friction if there's any moisture on your fingers. But with the Nano-texture glass, the fingers just glide very smoothly over the screen, which I happen to like a lot better. It also feels a bit more like paper when you're using the Apple Pencil Pro. I personally would not use a screen protector with this particular screen since it would just defeat the purpose of getting the Nano-texture in the first place. So if you're wondering whether a standard glossy display with one of the paper-like screen protectors is comparable in terms of glare reduction, the answer, I'm afraid, is probably no. The Nano-texture is likely to be much superior at reducing glare and reflections than any screen protector. But that said, some users have reported success with products by a company called Mothka that specializes in matte screen protectors. I haven't tried them myself, so I can't share any side-by-side comparisons. Now, there are some drawbacks to the Nano-texture. Since this texture scatters light, if you're in a well-lit environment, blacks won't be perfectly jet black like they are on a glossy OLED screen. Now, the upside is that you won't feel that you're staring into a mirror. For musicians, this, in my opinion, is easily worth the trade-off. Now, some people may also find text on a Nano-texture display to be marginally less sharp. I did compare it to my old M2 iPad Pro, and I found any difference to be very minor compared to all the dramatic gains that it offers for my use cases. So basically, the Nano-texture allows me to work anywhere, in any lighting conditions, indoors, outdoors, doesn't matter, without any distracting reflections. It also looks quite similar to paper, which is easier on my eyes. Now, if you opt for the Nano-texture version, you will have to be extra careful when it comes to cleaning it. My secondhand unit was missing Apple's expensive polishing cloth. The Apple Store here in Vienna recommended an alternative that they use in-store, but it turns out that the one Apple sells for an insane $20 or an even more insane 25 euros really does have its advantages. Turns out there's a scientist who analyzed it under an electron microscope, and he compared it to other microfiber cloths, and he demonstrated and discovered that Apple's cloth picks up debris much better than the alternatives. So I ended up biting the bullet and getting one. So what can I say? It works. It's much thicker than the microfiber cloths that you might use to clean your glasses, for instance. You'll just have to remember to carry it around with you with your iPad, since smudges will very quickly accumulate. For musicians, a stylus is really a must-have. This is one area that separates Apple from some of its competitors. Samsung includes their stylus as part of the standard package, whereas with an iPad you'll need to buy an Apple Pencil separately. The Apple Pencil Pro that I have here retails for $129 or €149, so it's a fairly expensive add-on. Alternatively, for the M4 iPad Pro, you can just get the regular USB-C Apple Pencil. That model lacks some useful features, most notably wireless pairing and charging. Now, personally, I'd recommend getting the Pencil Pro over the cheaper model if you're getting an iPad Pro. But there are also much cheaper and less fully featured third-party options that will work just fine. So either way, for musicians, a stylus of one sort or another is really a must. It makes working on a tablet screen similar to using a paper score. As a general use tablet, what can I say? It's pretty fantastic. It's notably lighter than the 12.9-inch M2 iPad Pro that it replaces, and that does make a difference in my experience. And with the new Magic Keyboard accessory, it's a pretty effective laptop replacement, at least for most everyday tasks like email, writing documents, web browsing, and the like. And it's now light enough and thin enough that the tablet plus Magic Keyboard combination is identical to carrying around a MacBook Air. With the 13-inch M4 iPad Pro with the Nano-texture display, Apple pretty much made the perfect tablet for musicians. It's a thin sheet of glass that looks and feels quite similar to using paper scores. The wafer-thin body somehow manages to house an extremely powerful desktop-level computer. Features like Face ID and optional cellular internet complete the package. Now, my only wish in terms of hardware would be even longer battery life. Now, my other wish is that the operating system will eventually evolve to become similarly powerful to macOS. That might be wishful thinking, but if that ever happens, then the device could really evolve for me to be not just a replacement for my paper sheet music library and a general purpose tablet, but a full laptop replacement. And the only major issue with the product that I have isn't the hardware or even the software, but rather the very steep price for the Nano-texture display. It's not the extra $100 surcharge or even €130 for those of us here in Europe, but rather the fact that Apple makes this glare-free option available only on the highest and highest capacity models. Musicians honestly just don't need this much storage, the extra processor core, or even the extra RAM, not just for sheet music, but really for any iPad music app. More system resources are of course always nice to have, but in this case, they'll just be idling, and musicians are forced to pay for power that they'll never actually use. Apple could easily rectify this situation by making the Nano-texture an option on the base model, which is already more than powerful enough for years of use. In the meantime, it's worth looking into the secondhand market. You might just luck out and find a 13-inch iPad Pro in mint condition for much less than retail. Happy practicing.